the throne of God, with its gospel free to trod, who announces peace, celebrate your feast, fulfill your vows to me, and I will never let you down. Tzion Arimi, Yerushalayim, lift your voice on high, Jerusalem. In you the gospel sing, the ways of the King. So lift your voice on high, Jerusalem. Oh, we worship you for all that you do. We will bring an offering in the courts of our King. Oh, lift your voice on high, Jerusalem. Zion is the throne of God, with its gospel free to shod. Who announces me? Celebrate your feast, fulfill your vows to me, and I will never let you down. Tzion Arimi, Yerushalayim. Oh, lift your voice on high, Jerusalem. In you the gospel sing, the ways of the King. So lift your voice on high, Jerusalem. Oh, we worship you for all that you do. We will bring an offering in the courts of our King. So lift your voice on high, Jerusalem. Oh, we worship you for all that you do. We will bring an offering in the courts of our King. Oh, lift your voice on high, Jerusalem. Oh, lift your voice on high, Jerusalem. Lift your voice on high, Jerusalem. Mountain is his foundation. You love the gates of Zion. Oh, more than all the dwellings of Jacob, O city of Elohim. O Zion, it will be said, this one was born in her. Elyon Most High will establish her. This one was born here. We sing and dance there by springs of joy are in you. Oh, hail Adonai, Sha'arei Tzion. You love the gates of Zion. Oh, all of my joy. Oh, all of my joy. All of my joy is in you. Oh, all of my joy. Oh, all of my joy. gates of Zion, more than all the dwellings of Jacob, O city of Elohim. Again, the holy mountain is his foundation. You love the gates of Zion.
Worship you and we thank you, along with praising you for creating Tzion, praising you for creating your message, your gospel that you showed through Tzion. And I ask that you would emblazon Tzion on our hearts so that we would truly be Lev Tzion, heart of Zion. Thank you, Abba, for your Torah and your Spirit. And I ask that your Torah and your Spirit would teach us, because you teach Torah, and ask that you teach us your Torah today in the name of Yeshua. Amen. For those of you listening on the internet, thank you for listening on the internet. And remember, you can make comments in the comment section underneath the video. Subscribe, share the video with people. Remember, we're not working to spread me and my voice. We're working to spread Tavniot, pictures. That's what's important, is spreading Judaism as pictures, as a set of pictures of heavenly things. That's what we're after. So, in the Torah portion this week, Kedoshim it starts out saying, speak to Israel and tell them, basically it says, speak to Israel, tell them to be holy. Just that, which is like a weird thing to say. And remember last week when we started talking about the Omer, Started talking about the actual count, when we start the count, all that sort of thing. And counting the Omer, and what its purpose is, it's to refine us, to change us, to make us into, a better version of ourselves. And there's it's called a machlochet. I don't even know if you can say machlochet. It's hard to say, machlochet. That means an argument. Right. There's thousands of them in the Talmud. Thousands of machlochetim, or machlechtot. I don't know how to say it. I don't know if it's masculine or feminine. But there's thousands of these disagreements in the Talmud. The reason that they're there is to present two versions of the same thing. And it's very important that it's not just one voice going out saying, this is, the legal dictum, like a judge. That's not how Judaism is set up. It's set up as, like you have this what's called a plumb line, which is the Torah and is what God gave to the sages about Judaism, and then wrestling with that all together, you're usually going to end up with 2 or 3, maybe even 4 opinions about what that plumb line is showing us. And that's fine. That's cool. That's why they're in the Talmud. They're not disagreements like arguments, like with denominations. They're disagreements to show 2 different things at the same time, sometimes 3. Now, this verse is one of those examples. God says, Moshe, speak to the entire nation of Israel and say, be holy. And he doesn't say how. And so because of this, there's a disagreement between the sages. Well, Rashi and Nachmanides, which is Ramban, he was the head chief rabbi over Spain. There's a disagreement between them. And one says, it's like taking all that God said right before this and in this Torah portion about sexual sin, sexual impropriety, boundaries, sexual boundaries, not breaking those. And if you do that, you make yourself holy. That's true. That is true. But Nachmanides says, no, it's a separate mitzvah. That there's 612, and then God comes along and says, be holy, and that's actually a mitzvah. And what he says is that he says what I say. You want to be holy? Do Judaism. That's it. That's all there is to it. And while you're doing it, look for it to teach you, listen to it, and you're holy for that time period. Does that make sense? Now, he says it in different words, but basically that's what he's saying. He's saying, learn from each mitzvah, and you will become like that mitzvah. God's the one who created the mitzvah, and he says, be holy like what? Like I'm holy. Okay, you want to reflect God? Do the mitzvot. So, it might be that it is a separate mitzvah. It might be. It might not be. But either way, both views are correct. There are boundaries that we work to protect and to keep. And at the same time, just the overall broad thing of just do Judaism and you will thereby become more and more like Judaism, which is being holy.
Couldn't we say that one's physical and the other one's spiritual?
No, because they're both physical and they're both spiritual. That's the thing about Judaism. Judaism, like when you say it's another law, it's a physical thing. Even though you may not perceive it as physical, it is physical. Every single one of the 613 mitzvot are physical things to do. Like, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, which is in this Torah portion. How do you do that? Physically. Okay, well that's what Judaism is for. It teaches us how to do it. You shall love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? Well, it's physical. It's not just, mental. All right, so that's in this Torah portion. Now, we're going to leave the Torah portion and talk about the counting of the Omer. And we're on the second week, which is the first gift. Last week we went through all 5 gifts. I talked about the processes that define the 5 gifts, and now we're in the first one. So this is review. The verse, Leviticus 23:15 is where the whole thing comes from. You shall count to yourself or for yourself, to you, from after the Sabbath, from the day of the Omer of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths, perfect they shall be. Until after the 7th Sabbath, you shall count 50 days. And 2 points in this verse 15 that's so important. Number 1, it says, Usfartem lachem, which means you shall count to you. So that makes it personal, right? Pretty clear, pretty simple. It makes it personal. The counting of the Omer is applied to oneself. It's an individual and a personal act. And then Shabbatot Tamimot, it says 7 perfect weeks. Therefore, the process is done to the barley harvest and then to the wheat harvest is perfecting or refining the Omer, and therefore it creates 7 perfect weeks, which means 7 perfect weeks that you apply to yourself. So we're the Omer. Just picture a container bigger than this, about 2 liters, which is not quite twice this size. That's an Omer. It's an Omer of grain. So picture a measure. Picture a measure. Can I have that Kleenex box? Thank you. This is about the size of an Omer of grain. Little bit bigger than this, maybe just half an inch on either side, on each side. But it's an Omer, it's a measure. Don't picture a sheaf of wheat, because it's not a sheaf of wheat once it goes into that house. Once it goes up to the house, it's not a sheaf of wheat anymore. It becomes a measurement, which is an Omer. So every one of us is a measure, is one of these. Does that make sense? And so is the body of Messiah, because body Messiah is a dude. What dude? Yeshua. It's a Jewish dude, right? Okay. So he's an Omer. His body is an Omer. And all these things have to happen to it to refine it. That's done during this time. Okay. And the prayer, should we turn the lights off or leave them on? 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 Okay. So the prayer tells us this. Tells us the purpose of the counting of the Omer. You have established for us through Moshe your servant to count the Omer in order to purify us. Those are powerful, powerful words. That all of Israel acknowledges that this time period is to purify us. Do you get what I'm saying? I mean, like all of Israel says, yeah, this time period is set aside to purify us. So if you jump in the game and you play by the rules of the game, this will happen to you. If you don't care, it might not. So if you look at believers' lives, listen to what I'm saying. If you look at believers' lives and you do not see them being refined during this time, what does that tell you? Yeah, they haven't jumped into the game, that's all. So don't judge them. They don't know the rules. They're not playing the game, that's all. That's all. That's all it means. Because I've seen people who do play by the rules of the game judge those who don't. You understand what I'm saying? And we can't. They've never been taught. They don't know. And God is really, really, really nice. So he might sprinkle a few things in there to test them. If they don't know about counting of the Omer, he might, but he might not. It's all up to him. But what we cannot do is expect everybody to know what the rules of the game are. Only, if we know them, we play by them. That's all. So this time period in all of Israel, all over the world right now, is being acted out in order to purify us from our evil and uncleanness. As you've written in your Torah, you shall count to yourself. Pretty amazingly clear, isn't it? That's the time period's purpose. All right, and here's what was done. They reaped it, put it into baskets. This is what we're going to look at today. They reaped it and put it into baskets and brought it to the temple court. Now that's the first thing that's done to it. And if you don't know, what was done was the priests would go out to a field that has been set aside for this purpose. They sowed it with the right kind of barley. They watered, they took care of it, they hoed it, they dunged it, they took care of the whole field so that it grew up at the right time. And then priests went out the night before, which is Passover. They went out on Passover and they tied up the sheaves. Now those are sheaves. Sheaves are when the grain is tied up into these bundle thingies, right? Okay, and they go and they tie it up with other grain and they just wait. That night, the priests would go out in a procession with a sickle and they'd wait for the sun to go down and he'd ask questions. He'd say, with this sickle? Yes. With this sickle? Yes. With this sickle? He asks everything 3 times just to confirm it. And then he says, has the sun gone down? Yeah. So they ask these questions to make sure that it's the right plot of field, the right plot of grain, it's the right time, it's the right people doing it, they got the right tool. And they ask these questions to confirm, they make sure that they're doing the right thing at the right time. And then they start cutting down 10 sheaves, usually 10. I mean, it depends on how big they make them, but usually 10 sheaves, which will produce 1 Omer of grain. 10 sheaves will produce that much grain. That's all. Okay? Usually. Depends on the size of the sheaf, but it's usually that. And they'd bring those sheaves up to the temple. Now, the second they go bring it up to the house, it's no longer sheaves because they loosen it and they put them in baskets. So now it's not sheaves anymore, it's baskets. Okay? So the look of it changes because it says they put it in baskets and then they brought it up. The sages say they used to thresh it with reeds and stalks, etc. So we're going to look at the rest of it as we go on. But for today, we're just going to look at the gathering of the sheaves and the gathering of the Omer. Now, Ephesians 4, which talks about the gifts using counting the Omer terminology. I thought of this phrase on Thursday. And by the way, on the sheets that I gave you, it has the counting of the Omer in there from Thursday. Remember, today is the 14th. Okay. So, on Thursday, I thought of this phrase, and it was this. And don't get offended. Just stay with me and think about what I'm saying, okay? I'm saying this on purpose for a reason. It's important. What gives Paul the right to talk about gifts? What gives him the right? Who is he? Unless he's teaching from Judaism. Does that make sense? And he is. Because if he's not, he has no right to teach some new doctrine. He has no right. Correct? Right. Every single thing is a picture of spiritual things, of heavenly things. So you come to the New Testament, it must be rooted to the Tanakh, or else you don't know what you're looking at. You don't have a clue. But if you can find the anchor point in the Tanakh that it's anchored to, and you plug it back in, it's like, oh, everything starts making sense. And it's like, Shaul didn't need to come up with something new. Paul didn't need to invent some new doctrine. All he did was say, this is why we've been doing this for 2,000 years. This is why, which is wonderful. So what he says is there's one body, one spirit, just as also you were called in one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one immersion, one God. Now why is he saying one? One Omer. That's what this is all about. It's like doing all this stuff to create one Omer. Just picture this as the body of Messiah, a little tiny container with grain in it that's perfect. This is one Omer, which is one body. So that's why he says one. Make sense? So already we've got our mind, we should have our mind directed towards Sfirat Omer. But to each one of us, gift was given. Now it doesn't say given in Psalm 68, remember. What does it say? Taken. God took gifts in man. He took gifts in man. But here, it's turned to say given. But to each one of us, gift or grace was given. It's interchangeable in Greek. according to the measure, there you go. There you go, counting of the measure, filling of the measure. So now we've got another clue that it's counting of the Omer terminology. According to the measure of Messiah's gift or grace. Therefore it says, when he ascended on high, he led captive a host of captives and took gifts in men that he might fill, there it is again. What's the clue word there? Fill. That he might fill all things. Fill what? The measure. The filling of the measure. So there's another clue. So that he might fill it all up. And he gave some as apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors, some teachers. Now it doesn't go in order of the counting of the Omer, does it? Because the evangelist is the first one who goes out to cut down the barley. So why doesn't it say evangelist first? What he's doing here is he's going in order of, it's hard to say it where you don't get religious about it. Authority. He's going in order of authority. Because we know that there's elsewhere where it says that the body of Messiah is founded on the apostles and prophets. Yes? You recognize that? Okay. Well, he's going in order of like how it came down from God. First thing it came down from God was apostles. Then prophets. Then evangelists, those who were calling out. Then pastors, the shepherds of Israel. And then teachers. So it goes in order of how it came down from God. Kind of hard to explain, but that's what it is. For the equipping of the holy ones to the building up. Now this doesn't say in Greek building up. Guess what it says? Filling up. It says filling up. There it is again. The filling up of, let's see, where'd it go? Filling up of the body of Messiah. Okay, there's the body of Messiah. It gets filled up with what? With what?
With the measure.
With the measure of what?
Of the Messiah.
Grain. So the filling up of the body of Messiah until we all attain to the knowledge of the Son of God, to a ish tam, a perfect man. Why? Because the 7 weeks are perfect weeks. And they're supposed to make the body of Messiah into an ish tam. Now this is where I really could go off. So I have to like pull the reins in on myself. Here's why. The only person in the whole Bible that is called an ish tam is Jacob, the Jew. You get what I'm saying? This is supposed to be a Jew body. Until we all become like Jacob, the Jew. To a mature, an ish tam, a perfect man. To the measure, there it is again, the measure of the stature which belongs to the full. There's fullness again, filling up again. Over and over and over, he uses these key words of Messiah. So there's the body of Messiah. It is supposed to be a Jewish dude. Make sense? A Jewish person, a Jewish man. It is supposed to be, but it's not. The body of Messiah is a long-haired homosexual. Long, curly-haired, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, gentle, meek, Hellenistic homosexual. That's what the body of Messiah has become. Instead of it being a Jew, a happy, intense, loud Jew. That's what the body of Messiah is supposed to be. So I told you I could go off on this part, but this is me pulling the reins in, believe it or not. Okay. So the processes were done. Let's turn the lights off. I want you to see this picture of the first one. Reaping is the evangelist, the ones who get the initial grain into the house. Now, it's done in groups. I mean, nobody goes out by themselves to reap grain because it would take forever to reap. You know, you've seen wheat fields and barley fields. Well, maybe you haven't seen barley, but you've seen wheat fields, right? Yes? They're huge. One person cannot do this alone. It has to be a bunch. Now, what I'm going to show you is this, that the voice And by the way, today is not going to be an easy teaching. It's going to be hard to understand because there's been 2,000 years of indoctrination of the opposite. So it's going to be hard. If you need to ask questions about what I'm teaching, not about something else, but specifically about what I'm teaching, ask questions, and I'll try to field them as best I can. But I'm telling you right now, it's not easy to understand this. Because these reapers, it looks like a very quiet, calm, unified act, doesn't it? People go out and all they do is just go like this all day, right? Seems very quiet and calm, yeah? It is not. If you read the book of Ruth, you can tell it's loud, there's problems, it goes on all day and all night, and they sleep out in the fields, and people have arguments. All these things are presented in the book of Ruth. And there's judgments that are made and all kinds of things. It's loud, it's boisterous. You know why? They're living together. The reapers are out there living together in a community. Okay? So it's not like, oh, let us bring the sheaf in with our little sickle. It's a big to-do, and it's loud. And what I'm going to be talking about today is this aspect. It's harimi. Say harimi. Now that's the verse that we sang in Isaiah 40. It says harimi, which means yell out. Bakolach korech. Hold on. Sorry, I forgot the Hebrew. Let's see. Harimi bakoach kolech. Harimi, yell out, bakoach, which in strength, kolech, your voice. So it says over and over, yell out, loud, lift your voice in strength. There's a lot of words there that talk about being loud, yes? Okay. Once you figure out who it is that God tells to be loud, you're going to be very confused. And that's what we're going to talk about. Who does God say to be loud? Jews. And why does he tell them to be loud? That's what we're going to talk about. Yeah. Yes.
The fact that you're saying that that it's a group effort, that's why he sent them out in twos, in pairs?
He didn't send them out in twos. Oh. In the counting of the Omer, there's dozens and dozens of people doing the work. Sometimes up to 100. It's the whole community goes out together to do this. There's no pairs. Now, when they went out to cut down the sheaf, remember they're only cutting down 10 sheaves. It's very, very small. And even that, there's more than one priest. So, I have this book that I wrote called The 5 Gifts and the Omer. If you don't have this book to fill in the blanks of the teaching, you should get this book. You can find it on michaelwasherart.com under the My Writings page. Now, this has all 5 gifts, and it has an expanded version of what I teach in the big book. But even this doesn't cover what we're going to talk about today. So, we're going to learn the 2 words for evangelist first. There's 2 words for evangelist. Karia, say karia. Not Korea, Korea, and this one's harder, mevaseret. Now, Korea means to stand in somebody's way and yell at them. That's literally what it means. It comes from the word kara, which means to approach. It's the same word as the nearness offering, like a korbanot, a karban. Basically the same word. It means to approach God and be near. Well, this is a slight different form of the word. Kara, it means to yell out or call out, but it literally means to accost. Do you know what accost means? Yeah. Like to confront somebody, stand in their face and don't let them get by. So the evangelist is like this. They just call out. Now, in America, this is going to confuse you, I'm sure. going to try for it not to, but it probably will. In America, it's just the opposite. In America, it's like this. Shotgun, and they go where they go. I'm just putting out the seed. I'm just putting out the message. Woo! 1 million people got saved. That's how it is. Not like that in Judaism. In Judaism, it's like this. Look at me. I'm talking to you. Hey! Yell out. So it's very confrontational, the evangelist. Very confrontational. We live in America, so how much confrontation can an evangelist really do? But if they learn their gift, they can do this really, really well. They can actually, stand in somebody's way and make sure that they hear what they're supposed to hear because they're loud. Now, Isaiah 40, this verse that we're going to keep coming back to, this chapter we're going to keep coming back to, Isaiah 40, this one has the word kara or karia twice in the space of 2 verses. It says, speak kindly to Jerusalem and call out, vakiru, call out, accost her. Not accost her, but you know what I'm saying? That means something different in English. Stand in the way and call out to her that her warfare has ended, that her guilt has been removed. Sounds pretty, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound good? Yeah. Tell Israel, hey, your guilt's taken care of. No more warfare, no more problems. The voice of one calling out. Now it says the voice of one calling out. Koreh b'midbar, calling out in the wilderness. And it says, clear the way for the Lord. Who did that? John the Immerser, right. He was not an evangelist. Was he? No. What's he called? Right, he's a prophet. It says 4 times he was the prophet, John the prophet. In fact, he is Elijah. So if he ain't a prophet, ain't nobody a prophet except Moses. Yeah? But he said these words. He's the one who stood in the way and confronted Israel and accosted Israel and said, don't worry, your sins are taken care of. It's over. Your harsh warfare is over. Clear the way for the Lord in the wilderness. This is John doing this. He was not an evangelist. He was a prophet, but he was an evangelist. All right, so this brings up the 2 words I taught you last week. There's a difference between the gift and the what? Office. Very good. The office. Now, I hate the acts of a pastor. I like them being done to me, but I hate doing them because it doesn't come naturally to me. I don't feel people's feelings. I don't. I just don't feel anything. I see Scripture. I see the answer to problems. I see how to get from point A to point B. That's what I am, okay? But I have to be in the role and the office of a shepherd, of a pastor. I have to. Well, I've seen Eileen act in the office of an apostle, and she's a prophet. And I've seen Doug, who is a teacher, act in the office of, believe it or not, the pastor. I've seen him do it. He doesn't know he's doing it, but we all stand back and we talk about him afterwards and say, can you believe Doug acted like a pastor? So, it's different to do the role or the office and to do what you are inside. Well, John was not an evangelist, but he evangelized. And what did he evangelize? The message of Christ? No. He said, Israel, get ready, the Messiah of Israel's coming. Do Judaism. Get your heart right. Do teshuvah. Yeah. And he preached Judaism. Okay, that's another story. Now, the other word for is, yes, sir.
What gift was Abraham?
Abraham, I believe he was an evangelist because he had the stories are told that he had his tent open north, south, east, and west on all 4 sides. And it says, Yeshua said about him, they will come from north, south, east, and west to sit at the table in Abraham's tent and sit down and eat in the kingdom with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in Abraham's tent. So I think he was an evangelist, but that's the only info I have about it.
Okay.
All right, now, mevaseret. Mevaseret. This is the one that I really get enthused about. Say mevaseret. Mevaseret. See these 3 letters? Baser. That means flesh or meat, because it comes from basar, which means in Spanish it's carne. Carne. So an evangelist is somebody who brings what? Steak, right? Somebody who brings carne, meat. A kosher butcher, basically. A kosher butcher. Not just somebody who brings food. A kosher butcher, somebody who knows how to prepare it, and cut it up right and make it kosher and present it to humans. That's a mevaseret, yes.
And in Mevaseret, the way it's spelled starts out with a mem, and the mem has to do with melech or king, so it's kind of like a king meat, a kingdom meat.
Very good, very good. So it's the kingdom meat, not just the meat. Kingdom meat, very good. And that is true, that is absolutely true. That the true evangelist is supposed to be bringing kingdom message, kingdom meat. Now, the word basar, it's a weird word. Think about how weird that is. What does evangelist mean? A meat bringer. That's just weird. Why? Because basar means meat or flesh or rosy, like fresh meat, like it's fresh, something fresh. That's what basar is. Now, you don't get that in the translation of the Bible. Like when it says gospel in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament. We want to care about the New Testament. We're not there yet. Let's stick with the Old Testament, okay? And then I'll try to apply it to the New Testament. But the Old Testament, when it says gospel, do you know how it translates it? Anybody know how it translates it? No?
Good news.
Good news, right? Say it again.
Buenas nuevas.
Buenas nuevas, yeah, good news, right? That's how it translates it. Good news. I've seen it translated happy message. Okay. But it's meat. They translate it like happy message. It's a good message. It's meat. So it's hard to make that connection between the two, isn't it? Like, how do you get from happy message or from meat to happy message?
I brought you tacos.
What if the person doesn't like tacos? So we got to make the connection in the Hebrew for it to make sense. And the connection is this, that it's fresh. It means it's living. It's alive. Now, you read the word gospel in the Old Testament, and it's about somebody bringing a message that may or may not be good. Sometimes it's a bad message, horrible message. And the person who delivers it gets killed. But it still calls it in Hebrew a happy message. Why? Because it's alive. It's the gospel. It's the kingdom message. And that's what it comes down to. It is a message about God's kingdom. It may not sound good, but it's a message about God's kingdom. So that's why it says in Isaiah 40, and this is what I really want to focus on today. Get up on a high mountain, Zion. That's just like a stupid phrase in English. Hey, Zion, city that is like they built up on a hill. Get up on a high mountain, city. You see how dumb that is? God tells a city to get up on a high mountain. That's stupid. It's just ridiculous. It just doesn't make sense in any way, shape, or form. Does it? That makes sense to you? Would you go tell a city like Las Cruces, get up on a high mountain? No, tell the whole city to get up and move. It's just ridiculous. So try not to think spiritual, just think physical. Just in a physical sense. This is a dumb statement. It makes no sense. It's ridiculous. Get up on a high mountain, Zion, bearer of the gospel. And that's literally what I'll show you. That's literally what it says in Hebrew. Bearer of the gospel is Mevaseret, meat bringer. So he says, get up on a high mountain, meat bringer, gospel bringer Zion. It just makes no sense if you look at it physically.
I believe this is a metaphor.
Yes, well, if you look at it spiritually, that's what we're going to talk about. But I want you to see how ridiculous a phrase it is. That God tells a city to get up on a high mountain. And then he repeats it. Then he says, lift up your voice with strength, Jerusalem, bearer of the gospel. Now this one might work. He can tell the whole city, yell out, scream out, be loud with your voice. But to tell the city to get up on a high mountain, that's just dumb. So why is this so important? And why does he use the word Mevaseret twice? He calls Zion Mevaseret, yes? And he calls Jerusalem Mevaseret. They are the same place, right? And then he tells the whole city to get up high and scream out with the voice as loud as they can get. And he uses all these words about the voice being loud. More than one word, more than one adjective. Raise your voice, be loud, yell out. Lift up, now he said, look at this. Lift up your voice with strength. Lift it up. He says it again. Don't be afraid. Say to the cities of Judah, behold your God. So if it says, behold your God, and it's the city saying it, where is this city? Where is the city? On a high mountain. It's way up there. And that city up there, screaming out, says to the cities of Judah, behold your God. Therefore, where is God?
Up there in the city.
In the city. In the city. In the city. Yes?
Yes.
And that's what's important. It's what's taking place inside the city that God is saying, get up as high as you can and scream as loud as you can to the cities of Judah, not to the Gentiles. That's what it says. Say to the cities of Judah, behold your God. So where is God?
In the city of
In the city, way up high. Okay? Now, this is why this is important. Because it's the stuff taking place inside the city that is screaming out to the world. Here's God. Here's God. Where is God? In the stuff happening in the city. And that's who God is telling to get loud. Judaism.
That take place the day of the Lord?
No.
It's taking place now.
No?
This is in the book of Isaiah. It does not say it's in the day of the Lord. This is in the book of Isaiah. 700 years before Yeshua. It is not prophetic. It is not it never says it's in the day of the Lord. Never. I've checked, believe me. So, this is the message since Abraham. God taught Abraham Judaism, yes? How do we know that? Very good. Genesis 26:5. Thank you, Robert. Okay. And then Abraham taught others. And he was loud about it. And this has been the pattern that God has wanted ever since. For I don't want to say the Jews, I want to say Judaism. Because it's not the Jews doing this, it's the city itself and what's happening in the city that's yelling to the cities of Judah, to the other Jews. Here's God in all this Jewish stuff. So, I could say it's the Jews, but I think it's more accurate to say God's desire was for Judaism to scream out to the world and say, here is God. Okay. That's the Mevaseret. That's the gospel. That's the Basar. What's the Basar?
Judaism.
Well, I heard one person. Judaism. Because that's what's screaming from the city. All the stuff taking place in the city. Yes? Yes. the sacrifices, which is basar, living flesh, meat, the sacrifices, the kosher laws, the new moon, the Sabbath, the festivals, all that stuff is happening up in the city. And so the city is yelling out to the world, look, behold, your God. You want to see God? You got to go in the city. That means you got to go into Judaism to examine the kosher laws, the new moon, the Sabbath, the festivals. Sacrifices are included in the kosher laws. Yes? So those are the basics of Judaism. Those are what's being preached to the whole world from Judaism. Okay, so this is going to flip the whole world on its head and put it right side up to see that, quote, the gospel is Judaism. It always was. Or else how could you have the word mevaseret in the Old Testament? How could you have the word basora, which is gospel? Besorah. How could you have that in the Old Testament if there's no besora? Yes? And this is what you always see. And I have done this. I have done the research for you. And I wrote another book, which I'll talk about in a second, called The Gospel of Zion, which explains this, what the gospel really is. Now I'm going to say this again. How could there be a gospel that's like defined as the death, burial, and resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ? Accept him and you'll be saved. How can that possibly be the Basora if it says Basora in the Old Testament? So obviously there was a Basora before Yeshua came. And all God did was take him and plug him in. That's all. But what has happened is the gospel has become something completely different from what it was before Yeshua came. And after Yeshua came, for the next couple hundred years. The gospel continued as it was for about 200 years, and then done. And it flipped. Yes?
I want to say something. I am understanding, but at first when this was really being taught to me, because I was in the kingdom of Rome, it was extremely hard for me to understand.
Yes.
The reason is because the kingdom of Rome took place in my mind and all my generations back. So it's not an easy teaching.
It's not.
It's very hard. We really need to work with our minds
Mm-hmm.
and get the kingdom of Rome out of ourselves so that we can get the kingdom of Judaism and get
the Torah, the gospel. Yes. Okay. Now remember, this is all semantics. It's all words. It doesn't have anything to do with your salvation or anything. It's words that God teaches us that we're supposed to know. But because we live in this culture, it has been flipped upside down, and the whole world believes the gospel is something other than what it was. And I want to make sure you hear that word, was. Was. Not is, was. Now, I've been working on this little graphic for 36 years. Isn't that ridiculous? I've been working on it for 36 years. I keep trying and trying and trying to do this because this concept of Jerusalem, the city, Zion lifted up on a hill, calling out to the world, I've been obsessed with it, which I didn't even know I was obsessed with it, by the way. But I see it in so many pieces of my artwork over the years. I was obsessed with it from the time I was in college. And I did a little plaque about this big in brass. I cut it out in brass. And it's this. And not this design, but this idea. So I feel like I'm really starting to understand this after 37 years, this concept. It is extremely important. Here's what it says in Hebrew. Al har gavoa alilach mevaseret Tzion. Al har, go on, har, mountain, gavoa, high, Go on, you, Ali lach, mevaseret Tzion, gospel bringer Zion. That's a literal translation. Go on the mountain high. Go on, you, gospel bringer Zion. So who's bringing the gospel? Zion. In this part, Zion is bringing the gospel. Now, if you read the TLV, the Tree of Life version, and some other versions, it flips this around and it says, go up on a high mountain, you who bring the gospel to Zion. And so they go, you see, we're supposed to be out handing tracts to the Jews for Jesus. So they came up with this because they flipped the verse on its head. They don't know Hebrew. Now, the second part, God says this in Hebrew. Harimi bakoach kolech mevaseret Yerushalayim. Harimi, yell out in strength, bakoach, your voice, kolech mevaseret Yerushalayim, gospel bringer Jerusalem. Who's bringing the gospel? Zion and Jerusalem. Two words that are the same place that God says that's who brings the gospel. You don't bring the gospel to the Jews. The Jews bring the gospel to us idiots. Because we don't know anything.
That's why Judaism and Zion right now are under so much attack.
Eileen says that's why Judaism and Zion is under so much attack right now. Yeah, that's one of the big reasons. But I want you to understand that Rome has been silencing the mouth of Israel for 2,000 years.
Since it started.
Actually, from before the time of Yeshua. Started with the Greeks, 300 years before Yeshua. They've been silencing the mouth of the Jews. Because the Jews have the gospel. And what has happened, and I know this is hard to understand. I know it is. I just had a horrible experience teaching this, and it really, really offended one of the Christians I was teaching. I mean, really offended to the bone, because this is hard to understand for Christians, because it's been flipped upside down for 2,000 years almost in this culture, this Roman culture, this Greek culture. Yes, it has. It has stoked the fires of hatred toward the Jewish people, of course, yes. But the truth is that city, whatever's in that city, has been, that's the voice going out, those golden lines going out. That's the voice of Jerusalem going out, saying, here's God, not in Hellenistic whatever, in Judaism. You want to know God? You got to go see what's in that city. And here's the people happily dancing up. And some are Jews and some are Gentiles. And they're happily dancing up to Jerusalem. Okay. Now look, here's what it says. Go on a high mountain, gospel bringer Zion. Raise your voice strong, gospel bringer Jerusalem. Raise it up. Don't be afraid. Say to the cities of Judah, here is your God. Don't go to don't go to the Gentiles. Go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel only. This is what Yeshua was quoting. I'm convinced. This is what Yeshua was quoting.
Makes sense.
Doesn't it? Yeah. He says, say to the cities of Judah, go preach the Mevaseret, the gospel, only to the cities of Judah. And he said that. He says, go only to the cities of Judah. Do not go to the cities of the Samaritans or to the cities of the Gentiles, but only the cities of Judah. And preach what?
Good news. The kingdom.
There you go. The gospel of the kingdom. That's right. So I'm convinced this is what Yeshua was quoting when he said that. That's what became flesh when he said that. Okay, so because of this very, very difficult and divisive issue, I wrote another book called The Gospel of Zion. This is my latest book. I love this book. You know why? It's about Gentiles. That's why I love it. I get very, very excited when I see Gentiles doing Judaism. That's what thrills me. Not converting to Judaism, which we're going to talk about, but doing Judaism. That's what we're going to talk about. So, it says on the back, most people believe they know what the gospel is, but the truth is that the gospel is a thoroughly Jewish concept. In this book, you will discover that the gospel, as it was presented by Paul the Apostle, is very different from what has been historically and currently presented. So what is the gospel? Or more importantly, what was the gospel? What was it before Yeshua came? What was and what was it when Yeshua came? The author shows that the gospel was seen only in the ways of Israel, that is, in Judaism. Even after Yeshua came, the key to unlocking this truth is the mountain of the temple shouting its message to the world. All right, so this is what this book is about, but then it also goes farther and it talks about the Gentiles coming in. That's what really the gospel was about, the hidden part of the gospel. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about the gospel as Judaism. So if you're thinking about this stuff, you would naturally ask yourself some questions. One of them is like, well, okay, what was the gospel before Yeshua came? Like, how would they put it in the words? I would also ask, what about the phrase born again? Was that in existence in Judaism before Yeshua came? In Judaism, did they say born again? What did they mean? What was it? No, it wasn't. So this is stuff we're going to talk about. So here's the first question. That's all right. Here's the first question. Are Jews and Gentiles the same once they're in the community? Good question, Carmen. What community? What community? Very good. Mm-hmm. Very good. We love good questions. What community? The community of Israel. Because that's where the Mevaser, that's where the Besora, the gospel, was. Right? Yeah. I mean, just picture Jerusalem, the city, and inside there is all this message of God coming from Judaism. And that spread to all the cities of Judah, and all the Jews, and all their communities, all their Jewish communities have that stuff. Okay? What about the Gentiles? So then Yeshua comes along, and we're not going to look at this verse today, but in Ephesians chapter 2, we've talked about it many times, that it says Yeshua came down to knock down Soreg, the wall between the Jews and the Gentiles in the temple, and to bring both those who are far and those who are near, the Gentiles and the Jews, into the community of Israel, yes, the Commonwealth of Israel, the temple, Israel itself, the land itself, and Judaism. That's what Yeshua brought both Jew and Gentile into. So, look at this statement. Whenever any of the Gentiles convert, now we're going to talk about conversion, and accept all the mitzvot in the Torah, or a servant is freed, they are considered as Jews with regard to all matters. Just like it says in Numbers 15:15. For the community there will be one Torah for you and the, what they call convert, or ger in Hebrew. Gers means stranger or alien. Well, they translate it usually as convert. A ger may marry within the Jewish community immediately, right after they, quote, convert. A male ger or freed servant may marry a native-born Jewess, and an Israelite may marry a female ger or a freed maidservant. This is from Maimonides in Mishnah Torah, a summation of all the Torah, forbidden intercourse, number 2. But I like it because it's nice and simple. It says, Jew, Gentile, you're the same. Why?
Because they're all doing Torah.
Right, because they're all doing Torah.
That's what unites them.
Jew and Gentile are all the same once they're in the community.
And even circumcised.
Yes. I said Jew and Gentile. That we are all the same once we're in the community. But what's the binding factor of both Jew and Gentile? They're both doing Judaism. Now, it says this. Shaul taught this very clearly in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 19. He said, being circumcised doesn't matter, and being uncircumcised doesn't matter. But what matters is... What? Come on, answer me.
They're doing Torah.
Really? You're not going to say a circumcised heart?
The circumcision of the heart.
That's what most people answer, and they're wrong. It says doing Judaism. You guys are right. Doing Judaism. It doesn't matter if you're circumcised or uncircumcised. What matters is keeping the mitzvot of God. Doing Judaism. So a ger, a Gentile, a stranger, alien, they come in, we translate it convert. But there is no word for convert in Hebrew. It does not exist. So anytime you read ger in the Talmud and the Mishnah and the Jewish writings of any kind, it translates it convert or a convert. But it's not a convert. It's just a Gentile who has come in, and some of them do go all the way. They circumcise them, or they get circumcised, they go in the mikvah, and they're full-blown Jews, man. And they call them converts to this day. But the truth is they're not converts. There's nothing to convert to. You can convert to being a Muslim, right? You can convert to being a Christian, right? You can convert to become a Buddhist or a Zoroastrianism, but you can't convert to do Judaism. You just do it. And that's how it's always been. Are you with me so far? It doesn't matter if you're circumcised, a Jew, or uncircumcised, a Gentile. But what matters is, finish the verse. Yeah. That's it. That's it. That's it. It's simple. Now, if you do Judaism without looking for the picture in it, you're messed up in your head anyway, so it doesn't matter. If you do it and you look for the picture to teach you, you hear from God. That's another matter. What we're talking about right now is the roles of Jew and Gentile. Why? Because we're talking about the gospel. What has happened is the Jewish people who owned what the gospel is lost it. And the Gentiles took it and twisted it into something else. So what we're trying to do is go back and figure out, what is the gospel really? Well, it's all about Judaism. It is Judaism. And it invites the Gentiles in to do that Judaism through Yeshua. Now, the person that got super offended when I was teaching this last, what bothered him so much was he was taught for his whole life, and he teaches it, that the gospel is Yeshua. It is Yeshua. And what I said was, and I was very careful with my words, what I said was, belief in Yeshua is one teeny tiny little part of the gospel, of the Besorah. The Besorah is huge. Yeshua, belief in Yeshua is one tiny little part of it. Yeshua is like the doorway to get into Judaism. That's all. And he makes your spirit alive, which we'll talk about in a while, if we get there. Okay, so here's the second question I had. Were Jews evangelical? Before Yeshua came, were Jews evangelical? Did they go preach the Besorah and say, Gentiles, come to know God? Well, most Christians say, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
They were.
So I did research and I found out they are. But I want to start with this verse in Matthew, because this is what people look at but don't read. They look at it, but they don't read it. Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte. They do what?
Right? They go evangelize.
They travel the whole world to make a, quote, convert. Isn't that evangelical?
Totally.
Because everybody focuses on the thing he says after that. And when he becomes one what? A ger, right? You make him twice as much a son of hell as you. That's what everybody focuses on, instead of seeing that Yeshua said, you traveled the whole world to evangelize. Now, you screwed them up after you've evangelized them, but you evangelized them. Okay? So Judaism, just seeing in that verse, is very evangelical. So I'm going to prove to you that they were evangelical with the Besorah, which is whatever's coming out from Jerusalem. The sacrifices, the new moon, the kosher laws, the festivals. Yes? Yes. One of the most famous was Helena, I can never say this right, of Adiabene in Iraq or Babylon. They were adherents of Zoroastrianism. That was the religion in Babylon, Zoroastrianism. It's, by the way, it's in Zoroastrianism is the god Mithra that was born on December 25th. Right. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Both her and her son Izates were taught by the sages. And when I say sages, I mean the rabbis. Once the queen mother saw that things were tranquil at home, she decided to travel to Jerusalem to bring korbanot, that's offerings, in the Beit Hamikdash, in the temple. How can she go in the temple? Gentiles aren't allowed in.
Right.
So how'd she go in? Well, it tells us. She was studying with, she was taught by the sages. She was learning Judaism. That's all it takes. And so her and her son, by the way, both became gerim, or quote, converts. The more I say, the more I hate that word, convert. I just don't like it at all, because it just doesn't make any sense. So once she brought korbanot to the Beit Hamikdash. Once in the holy city, Helena found the land stricken with famine, and her family then used its great wealth to bring desperately needed provisions to feed the residents of Jerusalem. And you know what else she did? She commissioned huge gold sculptures of vines, grapevines, for the front of the temple. I have that in your illustration. Although this was after Solomon's temple. Huge vines in gold for the temple, and golden menorahs for the temple. That's millions and millions of dollars she gave to the temple. Now look at this. The first two other quote converts that are famous is Shemaiah and Avtalion, who both lived at the same time. Shemaiah was the president of the Sanhedrin. You know what the Sanhedrin is?
The court.
It's basically like the Supreme Court of Israel. You had to know 70 languages to be on the Sanhedrin. You had to know part of 70 languages of man. You know who else was on the Sanhedrin? Nicodemus. But this guy, Shemaiah, who was a convert, who was a Gentile, became the president of the Sanhedrin. And at the same time, Avtalion, who was also a convert or a Gentile, he was the Av Beit Din, which is the head of the house of judgment, the presiding head judge. At the same time, these guys ruled. That's as high as you can get in the land. And they were Gentiles. So don't tell me Jews were not evangelical.
His name was Shemaiah.
His name is Shemaiah.
Listen up.
Right. Yeah, he's laughing because Shemaiah means listen to Yah. Listen to God. Listen up. Okay, Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest of all the sages, was a convert. He was an ignoramus. He was a shepherd. He couldn't even read or write. And then God called him, and he was like 40, I think, and he rose to become the highest guy in the whole land, the highest rabbi. Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest sages. His father was also a convert as well. Emperor Nero. Did you know he converted?
No.
Now, if you read the Roman histories, it doesn't say anything about that. Not a word. But
not.
right. But in a lot of the Jewish writings, it talks about Emperor Nero. His son was Titus. You know who Titus is? The guy who destroyed the temple.
Yeah.
So Emperor Nero, whose son Titus destroyed the temple, he came to Jerusalem during the Jewish wars after the temple was destroyed. The Jewish wars, and he later converted to Judaism.
So that was like towards the end of his life?
Yes, it was near the end of his life.
Teshuvah.
Yes, he did Teshuvah. One of his great-grandsons was Rabbi Meir, one of the greatest of all the sages in the Talmud. Isn't that amazing?
Was he a son of Titus?
I don't know. That I don't know who he came through. So, Onkelos Hager. You ever heard of Targum Onkelos?
Yeah.
Targum, there were two Targums written, Targum Jonathan and Targum Onkelos. It's the Aramaic, like paraphrase of the Tanakh. Amazing, amazing work.
Yeah.
That means they had to know Hebrew backwards and forwards and Aramaic backwards and forwards. And he was they even call him Onkelos Hager, the Ger.
Right.
He was a convert. Nephew of Emperor Hadrian, one of the worst emperors that ever was. He was his nephew. And Emperor Hadrian sent a whole bunch of Roman soldiers to go grab him and bring him back from Jerusalem, where he was studying Torah, to get him out of that Jewish nonsense and get him back into Rome. And he talked to all the Roman soldiers, and they all turned to Judaism. All the Roman soldiers to study Torah. So, those are just the famous ones. So here's my next question. I seem to be missing something here. Yeah, I am. So I have this quote that says that up to 10%, I think it's on your sheet, up to 10% of the Roman Empire was Jewish, not from birth. That the vast majority of Jews had converted from the Roman religion, the Roman paganism, to become Jews.
Yeah, at the bottom of the first page.
Bottom of the front page, thank you.
First century.
Listen to what I'm saying. 10% of the entire Roman Empire. Does it give a number there?
2 to 7 million Jews.
2 to 7 million Jews. Converted to Judaism, or decided to do Judaism and turned to God and did Teshuvah. 10% of the entire empire. So how could that happen if nobody evangelized them?
Right.
They were incredibly evangelical. Okay, here's my next question. The phrase born again. This is the part that's going to flip you out if you haven't already been flipped out. This is the part that's you're really going to wonder about. Maybe you'll love it, maybe you'll hate it. I don't know. But it will definitely affect you if you didn't know this. The phrase born again. I mean, that is clearly in the Christian camp, right? Not even close. Not even close. It's a Jewish phrase. It's a Jewish phrase.
Yeah, every month.
So that means you got to find it in the Torah, in the Tanakh. Now, I am not going to talk about a whole half of the doctrine of born again. I'm not going to talk about it. And that's about the moon. Because the moon is born again every month. And it literally says, Molad Sheni, born a second time, or born again. We're not even going to talk about that. That's in Judaism. We're going to talk about the other side of born again, which is what we've been talking about. A Gentile coming to Judaism. That's what born again means. I'm going to prove it to you. A Gentile coming out of Gentilism into Judaism is the phrase born again. It always was. It's not Yeshua saying you must be born again. That's nothing. It's nothing unless he's quoting something in Judaism. And he was the Word made flesh, right?
Yep.
Okay, so it's got to be in Judaism for him to say it. Okay, first of all, look who he's talking to when he says it. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. What does that mean, a ruler of the Jews?
Well, you said he was in the Sanhedrin.
That means he was on the Sanhedrin. That's what ruler of the Jews means. A ruler of the Jews is on the Sanhedrin. That means he knew 70, at least part of the 70 languages. He could make judgments. He knew the Torah backwards and forwards. And he taught doctrine to Israel. And to this sage, Nicodemus, Nicodemus came to Yeshua by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you've come from God. And he responded, to the sage, truly, truly, I say to you, unless someone is born again. Now, if he doesn't know what born again, nobody does. Right? He's a sage. He's on the Sanhedrin. He teaches what born again is. Or else there's no reason for him to be on the Sanhedrin. So, and to this guy, Yeshua says, unless somebody's molad sheni, he cannot see what? It doesn't say heaven, does it?
No, the kingdom of God.
It doesn't say heaven, does it? Okay, what is the kingdom?
The gospel, day of the Lord.
Wow, thank you, Apostle. What is the kingdom? The day of the Lord. The Messianic kingdom. You can't even see it if you're not born again. And then he says, unless somebody is born of water and of the Spirit, he can't enter the kingdom of God. What's the kingdom of God? Kingdom of God? The day of the Lord. When does it start?
In the year 6001.
6001 when?
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah. Okay, you know what the day of the kingdom is.
Trumpet.
Only somebody who is born again can see it and enter it, okay? Now this is Yeshua talking to a sage. What gives him the right? I'm going to say that same phrase I said about Paul. What gives him the right? Well, he's the Son of God. Nonsense. He's the Word made flesh. So therefore, these words have got to be in the Tanakh somewhere, right? Okay. So let's find out where they are. You're going to love this, I think. I hope. Now, remember, the Talmud is summing up Jewish doctrine. Okay? It's not inventing things. It's not making up stuff. It's not... It's clarifying what we already know. That's what the Talmud does. And the Talmud, this is one, Talmud Shabbat, 68b. It was Rav and Shmuel who both said, look at this, who both said, even a child who was taken captive among the Gentiles and a convert who converted. That doesn't even make sense. Convert who converted. What's the word for convert? What's the word for convert? Ger. And that's what it says in Hebrew. Ger shnat geir. It uses the same word. A ger who gered. A ger who became a ger. A ger who became a ger. So, and a ger who became a ger among the Gentiles have the same legal status as one who knew and ultimately forgot. Forgot what? You didn't follow it. Rav and Shmuel, who both said, even a child who is taken captive among the Gentiles, and a ger who became a ger among the Gentiles have the same legal status as one who knew something and then they forgot it all. What did they forget? No. They're past. It's a child who is taken captive among the Gentiles. So he's taken captive from his family and he forgot all about his family. He's got a new life, yes? And a ger who became a ger, he's the same way. He became somebody new. And he forgot all his stuff. Okay, that just sets up the quotes I want to show you. So it's saying that just like a little kid who's taken captive from his life, and he's got a new life, he doesn't even remember that past life. He's got a new thing. Okay?
Isn't that kind of like Moshe?
Very good, like Moshe, who forgot his past. Very good. Now watch this. Here's where it gets very, very, very clear. I want you to look first at the quotes. This is from Yevamot 22a, 48b 15, 62a 9, and Berachot 47a 2. That's only some of them. But I wanted to give you more than one, okay? Without the rabbinic decree, it would have been permitted for a convert to marry even a close female relative, even his twin sister. So that grosses everybody out, right? Yeah. Why? If they forgot their past and there's somebody new. Right. Why can't they marry their twin sister? No, I don't think, just the ruling is that they're the same as a little kid, right? So then why can't they marry their twin sister? They're not the same person they used to be. That's what it's saying. But because of that, there's a rabbinical ruling. This is because a convert has the same legal status as a born again. That's what it's saying. A Gentile who comes into Judaism is a newborn, legally a newborn. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. This is not like, oh, we're philosophizing and coming up with ideas. Legally, in Israel, you look at that Gentile who's doing Judaism and you go, that's a new person. And I'm going to treat them like a new person because they're born again. And he says more. With no family ties, testimony is handed over to the court, and the court knows to distinguish between the status of a born Jew and that of a convert. And the legal status of a convert who just converted, a ger who became a ger, is like that of a child just born. Is that not born again?
Pretty clear.
And what it says in Aramaic is, ger shenat gi'ir kikatav shnolad demi, which is the ger who just became a ger is legally like a child just born, a born again person. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? This is what born again is. It's Judaism. This is the one little part of the Besora. And it's amazing to me. It's just amazing. And all previous family ties become irrelevant. Just don't even exist anymore. Although it does exist. Look at this one. This is sort of a new statement. I don't usually bring in new statements, but I like this one. Chabad.org from Moshe Bogomilsky. I like this. I like the way he wrote it, so I brought it in. A person who undergoes conversion is considered what? A newborn, born again. And then he says, when an embryo is formed in the mother's womb, and the embryo is formed like born again, when the embryo is formed in a mother's womb, it's in a placenta surrounded by water on all sides. Similarly, the convert immerses himself or herself entirely in the water, in the mikvah, and emerges a new person, born again. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. The famed commentator Shalom writes, when one immerses in the mikvah, he should recite the verse, a heart that is pure, create for me, O God, from Psalm 51. Why? Because through immersion, he becomes a newly created person. He's born or she's born again. Isn't that awesome? The first letters of the Hebrew words pure, create for me, spells tahor, which is tahor barali, tahor barali, pure, create for me, spell out the word immerse. Tevel, which is the mikveh. Okay, gets better. That's just amazing to me. One who borrows from a convert whose son, now, by the way, this is the law that most of the comments focus on. So it's kind of confusing if you don't know the law, but here's the law that they focus on almost always. One who borrows from a convert whose sons had converted with him. So say Big G and Mary, you both converted, and then you became gers, and then little G became a ger at the same time. But there's a debt. So I borrowed money from little G. Do I have to pay him back when he converts?
No.
Why? Right, he's a new guy. He's legally a new guy. So legally, I don't have to pay that debt to him because he ain't him anymore. He's somebody else. And that's what most of the comments focus on, but watch what it says. Because Jews are just so smart. The sages are so smart. So it says, the debt need not be repaid to his sons, but if he returns it, if he pays back that thing, the sages are pleased with him. Conversion is considered to be a process similar to birth. Right. A person is, in a sense, born again when they convert. Now, this is also kind of modern commentary. Dr. Joshua Culp, commentary on the Mishnah. So he says, therefore, a person is, in a sense, born again, and we saw why, when they convert. Therefore, they lose any legal ties to their parents or children, and according to Torah law, children who convert do not inherit from their parents. Children who convert do not inherit from their parents. Why? Because they're not their parents anymore. Right. Therefore, if someone owes a convert money and the convert dies, technically he doesn't need to repay the convert's children who were born before he converted. If they were born after he converted, then they're legally considered his children. However, the rabbis praise a person who does repay the loan. Why? Because, after all, he does in reality owe the money, and we all know that in reality, these are his children. So you were walking in two worlds at the same time, the spiritual world and the physical world. But it is absolutely 100% true that in Judaism, what was born again? A Gentile coming to Israel. That's born again. And then Yeshua comes and talks to a sage and says, sage, unless somebody's born again, they can't see what? Kingdom. Yeah, not heaven. And if somebody's not born again, that means coming to Israel from being a Gentile, they can't enter the kingdom. He wasn't talking to Nicodemus about Nicodemus. Right. He was talking about the Gentile world coming to the Jewish world. But everybody reads it and they're like, oh, he's having a conversation with Nicodemus about Nicodemus, and Nicodemus is real stupid because he goes, well, can a man climb back at his mother's womb? Which he didn't say. He was quoting what the Talmud says about the moon, which literally says, can it come out of its mother's womb twice in 1 month? He's talking about the moon. And I told you, we're not going to talk about that. That's a whole other concept about being born again that has to do with the moon. Today we're talking about how it relates to what born again was. And what born again was Gentiles coming into Judaism. So, did born again exist before Yeshua came? Yes. Absolutely. Now look at this beautiful thing. This is gorgeous. I really love this. Psalm 87. His foundation is in the holy mountains. The Lord loves the gates of Zion more than all the dwelling places of Jacob. Even though it says, how lovely are your dwelling places, O Lord of hosts. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob. Your dwelling places, O Israel. Yes? Yes. But the Lord loves the gates of Zion more than all of those. Glorious things are spoken of you, city of God. Do you guys know what Selah means? Like in the Bible when it says Selah?
Isn't it like Selah about this? Amen.
Exactly. Think about this. With an exclamation mark. Think about it. That's what it is.
Stop and meditate, ponder it.
Yeah, well, those are big words.
Yeah.
I think, this is what it means. Think about that. That's how I like to see it. Glorious things are spoken of you, city of God. Think about that. I will mention Rahab. Anybody know where Rahab is?
She was one of the
No. That's a different word.
oh,
The location. I don't remember.
Okay, it's one of the code words for Egypt in Isaiah. He uses it 4 times. So Egypt, I will mention Rahab, Egypt, and Babylon among those who, what does it say? Who know me. I will mention Rahab, Egypt, and Babylon among those who know me. Behold, Palestinians and Lebanon with Ethiopia. This one was born there. But of Zion it will be said, this one and that one were born in her, and the Most High himself will establish her. The Lord will count when he registers the people. This one was born there. Think about that. So when he says think about that, what's he saying? He's saying that he's going to count Gentiles along with Jews when he counts the members of Zion. And it's going to say that here, but I'm just telling you that's what it's saying. This one was born there. Think about it. Then those who sing as well as those who play flutes will say, all my springs of joy are in you. And here's from Talmud Tractate Megillah. It says this, the Lord shall count in the register of the peoples. This one was born there. With regard to those nations who bring Israel back to their land, those Gentiles who bring Israel back to their land, that means they're with the Jews. And they're both going where?
To Israel.
To Israel, right. It is written that they will be counted together with Israel. What does this mean? That they are born again with Israel. I did not add those parentheses. It's in the text. It's in the text. They are born again with Israel. Isn't that cool?
Yeah. Totally.
Born again is all about the Gentiles coming into Judaism. That's what it is. But then you say the gospel in America to believers, and they are completely disconnected with Judaism immediately. All you have to do is say the word gospel, and immediately Judaism's out the door. But in reality, the gospel, the Besorah, is Judaism. And its message going out to the Gentiles, that's the Besorah, that's the gospel. And Yeshua is just one little part of that. That through him, Gentiles can come into Judaism. So, now that we know what the evangelist is, now think about this. Say you meet somebody who you identify their gift as an evangelist. Think about this. You identify somebody, you're talking to somebody, and it's so clear they're an evangelist. They don't know what the gospel is, most probably. What's the gospel? Judaism. And by the way, thank you. The gospel culminates in the kingdom. That's like the end goal of the Besorah. So they probably don't know what the gospel is. They think it's the death, burial, and resurrection of Lord Jesus Christ, which it is not. And they don't know what born again is, more than likely, because they think born again means accept the Lord Jesus Christ and you shall be saved.
You embrace Hellenism.
So you got to do 2 things. Number 1, you got to be patient and kind because they don't know. So you have to evangelize them. That's the other thing.
hard work.
It is hard work. You have to evangelize the evangelist and try to let them know what is. And maybe something will click inside. Now, ironically, the person that got so upset with me when I taught this was an evangelist.
Really?
Yeah, because he knows he's an evangelist. So you can see the problem. He's like, I've been opening my mouth and having something else come out that isn't the Besorah, the gospel. And I'm telling people they need to be born again, but in telling them a different message from what born again is or was. Right. So it really was hard for him, which I understand. I really do. I sympathize. So here's what I broke it down. I got it as clear as I can make it. What should the message of the evangelist really be? Well, first of all, God says, who does he call the evangelist? Zion, Jerusalem. Yes? So shouldn't the evangelist match Mevaseret Tzion? Because if you have a Mevaseret, a gospel bringer, who doesn't match who God says is the Mevaseret, you got a problem. You get what I'm saying? I'm going to say it again. Listen to me. If God says this is the Mevaseret, and he calls the Mevaseret who? Who? Jerusalem is the Mevaseret. And then you have a happy evangelist come along, and he doesn't match that Zion, there's something wrong. So you got to get them aligned. You've got to make them match. Whatever that word's coming out from Zion is about Judaism, the evangelist has to match it, or else it's a different message. And it is not the Besorah. It's not. They may think it is, but it's not. Because we know what the Besorah is. God tells us what the Besorah is. It's Zion, Jerusalem, up on the mountain, saying, come look inside the city. Here is your God. All right. So Psalm 76 says this. God is known in Judah. In Judah. God is known in Judah. So here comes a Mevaseret, happy little evangelist. Here's Zion. He doesn't match up. So the first thing you got to do is get him calibrated to say, it's in that city, in that nation, where God is known, in the Jews. If you can do that, that's a big deal. That's a good thing. So if that's true, the new Omer that the evangelist is bringing in has to hear the message of how God is known in Judah. So guys, how is God known in Judah?
Doing Judaism.
How? How do we get to know him? By doing Judaism. How?
Listening to the mitzvah.
Thank you. Kosher laws, new moon, Sabbath, festivals, which is a shadow cast by Yeshua. That's how we see the Besorah. That's how. By doing Judaism. So you get that calibration done by turning them toward the pictures and saying all of Judaism shows spiritual things, in particular Yeshua. All of it. Okay. So if you can do that, that's a big deal. Therefore, Gentile, let no one act as your judge in regard to food and drink, in respect to a festival, a new moon, or Shabbat, things which are a shadow, but the body, casting the shadow, is the Messiah. Now, second is the second word. First word was Mevaseret, second word is Karia. The Karia should accost. Stand in the way, get him to become a new baby. To get somebody to become a new baby, a new human being entirely. How do you do that? Get them into Judaism, but how? How? How do you get a Gentile to come into Judaism?
Evangelizing.
How?
We show them.
Okay, so all those things are true, but you're missing the point.
You evangelize.
Yeah, but how? 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 That's the question. Yes, but I'm asking how. Physical. You're going spiritual again, hon. Let's keep it physical. How do you get Gentiles into Judaism?
You get them born again.
There you go. There you go. Watch. Okay? Why would these Gentiles outside the Soret, what's going to make them come into Israel? They got to get born again.
Gotta be a new person.
You got to make them into a new person. All right, so how do we do that? Through Yeshua. 1 Corinthians 15. Every time I teach this, I just don't understand why Gentiles don't know this. Christians, I'm sorry, why Christians don't know this. When you get somebody born again, what's happening? And I've heard every answer you can imagine, but I never hear the simple thing. Their spirit comes to life. Done. That's it. That's all there is to it. So, but very few believers know how to answer this, and I don't understand it. 1 Corinthians 15, 45 through 47. It's written, the first man, Adam, became a nefesh chayai, a living soul. The last man, Adam, was a life-giving what?
Spirit.
Ruach, spirit, not soul. Not soul. However, the spiritual is not first, but the natural, the physical, then the spiritual. So if you don't understand the physical, ain't no way you're going to understand the spiritual. It's just not possible. So, first man is from the earth, earthly. The second man is from heaven, first and second Adam. So you get somebody born again. That means their spirit comes to life through Yeshua, and then they come in to Judaism, and they become a totally different human being. Yes?
Is that why it says we will do and then we will hear?
Very good. We will do and then we will hear. Very good. You do the physical and then you get the spiritual understanding. Yes. Okay, but I really want you to understand my heart about this. I don't get super excited when I see Jews who are believers. I don't really care that much. What I get super excited about is seeing Jews and Gentiles doing Judaism and learning about God together. That's what turns me on. That's what just thrills me. Both those who are near, the Jews, and those who are far, the Gentiles, both coming into Judaism and becoming a totally different person. Pretty simple, right? All right, and then the very last thing, I say to you, unless someone is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God, not heaven. Not heaven. This is not about heaven. I say to you, unless someone is born of water and spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God, not heaven. Therefore, you must teach them about the kingdom and the 7 days, and then 6 days, and then the kingdom, called the 7-day plan of God. All right? That's the job of the evangelist. That's a lot, isn't it? That's a lot. And yet, they're the simplest people of all the gifts. They're very shallow. I'm not saying that demeaning. It's just the way it is. They're shallow. They don't go very deep. They stay on the surface of things. And they take these huge, complicated things and make them into little packets. I mean, you see, like in the black church, usually their leaders will be evangelists. And they'll take these huge concepts. If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. And they make them into these little, phrases and stuff like that. That's an evangelist. I can think of a million examples, but that's just one that came to my mind. But that's what you got to be. An evangelist has to do with Jewish concepts. That means they got to learn all this stuff. Okay, so let's pray. That's about as good as I can do. About as good as I can do, and I think I've made it clear that born again is a Jewish thing, and it always has been in Judaism, and it needs to be flipped upright and put back into Judaism. Lord, I thank you for your Torah. I thank you for your Ruach. Thank you for getting us molad sheni, making our spirits alive first, and then inviting our pinta l'yid, our spark of the Jewish person inside of us, bringing us, inviting us into your Jewish world. And I ask that you would spread what the gospel really is throughout the world now. In the name of Yeshua. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.